Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
Every year, the tiny town of Alderbrook celebrated the arrival of spring with a local tradition called the blooming. It was meant to honor the thaw, the return of green, and the wildflowers that erupted like flames across the hillsides. Locals would gather in the town square, share food, dance barefoot in the grass, and send lanterns into the sky at dusk. Tourists sometimes wandered in, charmed by the quaintness. But there was one rule: never walk into the hills alone before the blooming. In late March of 2017, a college student named Kaylee drove into Alderbrook to visit her boyfriend Mason, who had taken a semester off to care for his grandfather. She arrived the week before the blooming, when the air still held a bite, and the flowers hadn't yet broken through the frost. Mason welcomed her warmly, but seemed distracted, casting glances out the window as if watching for something. He told her about the festival and the strange local customs, laughing it off, but not quite meeting her eyes. Curious and a little bored while Mason ran errands the next morning, Kaylee decided to take a walk. She saw the rolling green hills out her window, dotted with bare patches of dirt and clusters of strange pale plants, brittle things that looked like bone fingers pushing through the earth. Ignoring the local warning, she followed a deer trail that wound between the hills. There was something mesmerizing about how quiet it was, like the earth was holding its breath. About a mile out, she found a circle of stones, old, moss-covered, and carefully arranged. In the center was a small wooden effigy, stick-limbed, headless, and tied together what looked like sinew. She crouched to get a better look, but didn't touch it. The air around the stones was strangely still, and the temperature felt colder within the ring. She heard a whisper behind her. She spun around. Nothing. No wind, no movement, just that brittle silence. When Kaylee returned to Mason's house, he looked at her like she was a ghost. She told him where she'd gone and watched the color drain from his face. He asked, barely whispering, if she'd stepped into the stone circle. She said no, but his eyes narrowed, like he wasn't sure he believed her. That night, Kaylee had a dream. In it, she stood in the stone circle. The effigy was gone, replaced by something growing out of the ground. It looked like a person half buried in soil, eyes open, mouth packed with dirt, twitching slightly as if trying to speak. Around her, dozens of others were rising from the earth, skin like bark, mouths wide, whispering in a language she didn't understand. She woke up screaming. Mason tried to calm her, but he was trembling. He told her that when he was a kid, his cousin disappeared after stepping into those hills before the blooming. They found her shoes placed neatly beside the same stone circle. Her body was never recovered. Everyone in town knew someone who had vanished out there. The next few days grew stranger. Kaylee started sleepwalking. Mason found her standing barefoot in the backyard, hands caked in dirt, humming in a voice not her own. Her eyes were open, but she didn't respond until he shook her violently. She never remembered it. Worse, she kept finding small effigies around the house, under her pillow, in the pockets of her jeans, even inside her backpack. The night of the blooming finally came. Lanterns filled the sky, laughter filled the air, and for a brief moment it felt safe. Kaylee stood with Mason, trying to enjoy it. But then the music stopped, not all at once, just one instrument at a time. First the drums, then the flute, then the guitar, until there was only silence again. The crowd turned. Everyone was staring at Kaylee. She backed away, confused, then noticed that the grass around her feet had turned brown, wilted, dead. She looked down and saw soil, rich, black, and moist, oozing up through the grass beneath her. Something was growing from it, something pale, finger-like. A scream pierced the night, but it wasn't Kaylee's. It came from the hill behind the town square. More people began to scream as shapes rose from the earth. Figures with bark skin and hollow eyes, dragging themselves forward, whispering in unison. The townspeople didn't run. They knelt. Mason grabbed Kaylee's arm and ran, pulling her toward the house. She asked what was happening. He said it was too late. She'd brought something back from the hills, something that wasn't supposed to wake until the bloom. That night, the sky never lightened. The sun rose for every town around Alderbrook the next morning, but not for Alderbrook itself. Search teams eventually came when the town went silent, but they found only rows of abandoned homes, Dead fields and dirt paths covered in pale, brittle flowers shaped like hands. No bodies, no sound, just one thing left behind, a circle of stones. In its center, a new effigy, headless, stick-limbed, and tied together with long strands of red blonde hair.
Story number 2.
In April of 2009, a group of 5 friends from Seattle, Lena, Chris, Devin, Ari, and Mark, decided to take a spring road trip before finals week. Their plan was simple: rent a cabin near the Olympic National Forest, unplug for a few days, and relax. They found a remote listing online, cheap, secluded, no reviews, and booked it without a second thought. When they arrived, the cabin was even more isolated than the photos suggested. No cell signal, no neighbors for miles, just trees, thick, dark, ancient. The place smelled like wet earth and old wood. It had 2 floors, 4 rooms, and a strange charm that felt more decayed than rustic. The first night went fine. They drank, played games, told stories by candlelight. Around 3 a.m., Lena swore she heard someone walking outside, heavy, dragging footsteps circling the cabin. They all stopped talking to listen, but the sound faded. Devin brushed it off, probably an animal. They went to sleep. The next morning, they found muddy prints outside, large, barefoot human, too long with a strange spacing between the toes. They led from the forest to the back door, then disappeared. That afternoon, Ari found something strange behind the cabin. A series of wooden totems, dozens of them, arranged in a circle, each one carved with the same face, wide mouth, no eyes, sharp, uneven teeth. Some had been broken, others newly placed. None of the friends remembered seeing them when they arrived. That night, things got worse. At exactly 2:17 a.m., every door in the cabin slammed open at once. No wind, no storm, just a deafening bang. The lights flickered. Chris ran to check the generator, but it was fine. They locked the doors again and stayed together in the living room, too shaken to sleep. Lena woke up screaming an hour later. She said someone had been whispering in her ear, "You saw us, now we see you." The following morning, Devin insisted they leave, but Mark said they were just freaking themselves out. He pointed to the fact that they hadn't seen anyone, just weird sounds and maybe some backwoods junk left behind. They argued, but eventually decided to leave the next day. That night, they heard crying from the woods. It sounded like a woman. Ari and Mark went out with flashlights, thinking maybe someone was hurt. The sound kept moving, always just out of reach. Then it stopped. When they turned to head back, they realized they were no longer sure where the cabin was. Meanwhile, the others waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. It was nearly dawn when Chris opened the front door and found Ari standing there, barefoot, covered in dirt, blood on her arms. She wasn't speaking, just staring. Mark wasn't with her. Devin took her inside while Lena called out into the trees. Still no signal. Ari eventually started muttering under her breath, something about the faces in the trees and the backwards man. Her voice was flat, robotic, like it wasn't her speaking. They never found Mark. The next morning, the group tried to carry Ari back to the car, but the road they came in on was gone. Just trees. Endless, thick trees, like the forest had closed around them. That night, Ari vanished. They found her bed soaked in muddy footprints. No blood, no struggle, just the lingering smell of wet rot and pine. Chris lost it. He grabbed an axe and tried to destroy the totems. As he struck one, the sound echoed unnaturally, and a high-pitched wail filled the air, like a scream played backwards. The trees began to shake, though there was no wind. Lena and Devin ran. They didn't look back. They found a ranger station 3 days later, hysterical, dehydrated, barely coherent. A search team returned to the cabin site, but the GPS coordinates led them to a clearing. No cabin, no road, no sign of Chris, Ari, or Mark. Only one thing remained: a new wooden totem, freshly carved, set into the ground. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide. Its teeth were human.
Story number 3.
In the spring of 2014, a biology graduate student named Danielle took a research assistant position at a remote wetlands reserve in Louisiana. Her advisor had warned her that the area was largely undocumented, thick with fog, home to rare species, and largely avoided by locals. But Danielle, eager to impress, accepted immediately. The project was simple: catalog plant insect life, collect samples, and return in 3 weeks. She arrived in early April when the trees were just starting to bloom with pale green leaves and the frogs sang constantly at night. The station was a small wooden shack built on stilts, surrounded by miles of dense, waterlogged forest. No internet, no phone reception, just a two-way radio that barely worked after sundown. The first few days were quiet. She kept a notebook, collected specimens, and paddled a small canoe through the dark water channels. The swamp felt ancient, older than time itself. Some mornings, she'd wake up to find her samples disturbed, lids off, insects crushed. She figured it was raccoons or weather. Still, she started double sealing her equipment and locking everything before bed. On the fifth night, she woke around 3 a.m. to a sound outside the shack, wet footsteps squelching slowly in the mud. She sat up, heart pounding. The footsteps circled the cabin twice, then stopped. Silence, then a single knock on the door. Not hard, not hurried, just one deliberate knock. Danielle stayed frozen in her cot. The knock never came again. When she finally crept to the window, no one was there. The next day, she found long scratches on the support beams beneath the shack, 3 jagged lines, low to the ground, as though something had dragged sharp claws along the wood. She reported it over the radio, but the connection crackled and died halfway through the call. That evening, she paddled farther than usual, trying to shake the unease. Deep in the channels, she came across something strange. A wooden pole sticking out of the water with several frogs impaled on it. Clean, precise, freshly done. It wasn't scientific, it was a display. The water around it smelled sweet and sour, like rotting fruit. Something moved beneath the surface, and Danielle turned back quickly. That night, the footsteps came again. This time, they didn't stop. They moved back and forth beneath the shack for over an hour. Then the boards began to creak, just slightly, like something heavy was pressing up from underneath. She didn't sleep. When morning came, she found something on her windowsill. A dead bird, tongue missing, with tiny holes bored into its skull. Something had sucked the brain out through a hole the size of a straw. She tried the radio again. Nothing. She began packing to leave. That afternoon, while collecting her last batch of specimens, she saw something crouched at the edge of the trees. It was tall but hunched, hairless, with skin the color of wet paper. Its limbs were too long, arms dragging through the mud, head cocked at a sickening angle like it was listening to something deep underground. It didn't move, it just watched her. Danielle ran. She paddled back to the shack and locked herself in. Night fell fast. Then the smell came, sweet rot, like the air itself was dying. She heard something on the roof, first pacing, then scratching, then chewing. In the morning, she crept outside. Her boat was gone. Drag marks in the mud led toward the trees. She followed them just long enough to see it, her canoe shattered and half sunk in the swamp. And beside it, a pile of bones stripped clean, neatly arranged in a spiral. She spent 3 days trying to find the path out. The forest twisted in on itself. No matter how far she walked, she always ended up back at the shack. By the 6th day, she stopped trying. The water was rising. On the 7th day, a rescue team found her, kneeling on the roof, dehydrated and mumbling in a monotone voice about the thing under the water and the swamp that eats itself. They took her to a hospital in Baton Rouge. She never spoke again. Her research notes were found scattered throughout the cabin, pages torn, some stained with what looked like bile. One page had a single line written over and over. "It can't leave the swamp, but now it remembers me."
Story number 4.
In May of 2011, a substitute teacher named Mr. Halverson took a short-term contract at an old elementary school in rural Pennsylvania. The regular teacher had gone on unexpected medical leave, and the district needed someone immediately to finish the spring semester. The school was small, only about 90 students total, and sat near the edge of a dense patch of forest that locals simply called the Pines. From the first day, Mr. D. Halverson noticed something strange. The children avoided the windows facing the forest. Even during free time or story hour, they would subtly angle themselves away, never turning their backs to that side of the classroom. When he asked about it, most gave vague shrugs, but one girl, Emily, quietly told him, "The trees watch us, and sometimes they want one of us back." He laughed it off. That night, he mentioned it in the break room to another teacher, Miss Cleary, who went pale. She told him not to joke about the Pines. Years ago, 3 kids had gone missing from the school, one in 1995, one in 2002, and one in 2009. each 7 years apart, each taken in spring, none ever found. The only thing they had in common was they had all been in the same classroom Mr. Halverson now taught. He assumed it was a weird local myth. Rural towns always had their ghost stories. Then things got odd. The next morning, when he unlocked his classroom, he found deep scratch marks along the inside of the window frame. Not graffiti, claw marks. Long, precise, fresh. He reported it to the custodian, who gave him a tired look and said, "Might want to keep that curtain drawn." He left without saying more. That same day during recess, one of the boys, Tyler, wandered too close to the forest line. Mr. Halverson called him back, but the boy didn't respond. Just stood there stiff, like he was listening to something. When Halverson finally ran over and touched his shoulder, Tyler gasped and collapsed, screaming. They had to call his parents. Before he left, he kept repeating one phrase. "The man with no lips was whispering my name." The next morning, Tyler didn't return to school. Then Emily disappeared. She was in class during art time. Halverson left for just 2 minutes to grab more paper from the supply closet. When he returned, she was gone. No one saw her leave. No one heard anything. Her chair was still warm. The police were called. The school went into lockdown. They searched the building, the forest, everything. No sign of her, not a footprint, not a sound. Just a small drawing she had left on her desk. A child standing in front of a tall figure, completely black, with a smooth white face and no mouth. Around them, rows of trees with eyes. The classroom remained closed for a week. When it reopened, only a handful of students returned. Mr. Halverson insisted to the principal that he needed to know the full history of the school. Eventually, he was given access to the old basement records. What he found chilled him. Every child who had gone missing was in room 3, the room he was teaching in. Each one had drawn similar images in the days leading up to their disappearance. Each had mentioned the man with no lips. He went back to the classroom after hours, desperate to understand. The room was silent, the air heavy. He walked to the window and on a sudden instinct pulled back the curtain. Standing at the edge of the forest, half shrouded in mist, was a tall black shape. It didn't move, it didn't blink, but he knew it was looking at him. He quit the next morning, left town, never taught again. 3 weeks later, another student went missing, a boy named Caleb. 7 years later, in the spring of 2018, another substitute teacher arrived to cover room 3. The locals say the forest is patient. It always takes what it's owed, and it never forgets a promise made in silence.